Who's at 5 and 10.
The targets of the western zone were the military airport near Tripoli.
It must rank as one of the most widely telegraphed military attacks in history.
We're aware of intensive Libyan preparations that were already underway for terrorist operations against Americans. Mr. Gaddafi must know that we will hold him fully accountable for any such actions. Who's responsible for a fine sergeant in our military dead and 50 young Americans lying in a hospital wounded because of that dastardly attack in West Berlin? And if there's identification enough to respond, then I think we respond.
At 7 o'clock Eastern Time tonight, the United States active.
Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again.
Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel, and this is a special edition of Nightline.
Despite our repeated warnings, Gaddafi continued his reckless policy of intimidation, his relentless pursuit of terror. He counted on America to be passive. He counted wrong.
The United States has bombed Libya. Now the question is, what's next?
This is a special edition of ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
It has been in the wind for days. For a time, in fact, the move toward military action was so blatant that it looked like a bluff. The movement of 2 U.S. Navy carrier battle groups through the Mediterranean back towards Libya obviously put the United States in position for an airstrike. But when American F-111 fighter bombers and tanker planes took off early this afternoon from 3 air bases in Britain, the cover story was that they were embarking on a long-planned military exercise codenamed Salty Nation. Here in Washington, meanwhile, information dried up. At a White House welcoming ceremony for Japanese Prime Minister Nakasone, some of President Reagan's top national security aides were seen huddled in the background. They had been at the White House meeting since early morning. At 1:45, President Reagan went to the old executive office building next to the White House to deliver scheduled remarks to the Associated General Contractors. As he was returning shortly after 2, U.S. aircraft were just lifting off from their bases in England.
Mr. President, are you going to do anything about Gaddafi?
Wait, be patient.
Mid-afternoon, congressional leaders respond to a White House summons and begin gathering at the old executive office building. At 4:07, they and the president's top national security advisors are joined by Mr. Reagan. The congressional leaders are briefed. Had there been significant congressional opposition, the mission against Libya could still have been scrubbed. As the meeting breaks up at 6, there are reports that the president may address the nation at 9. At 7:05, Peter Jennings is on the air live with one of our correspondents, Liz Colton, who is in her hotel room in Tripoli. The attack is underway.
Just now it's quiet. For the past 4 minutes, we've had planes overhead, anti-aircraft going off, flares in the sky, explosions, bombs that have shaken the whole hotel.
2 hours later, speaking from the Oval Office, President Reagan spelled out publicly why the United States attacked Libya.
The evidence is now conclusive that the terrorist bombing of La Belle Discotheque was planned and executed under the direct orders of the Libyan regime. On March 25th, more than a week before the attack, orders were sent from Tripoli to the Libyan People's Bureau in East Berlin to conduct a terrorist attack against Americans, to cause maximum and indiscriminate casualties. Libya's agents then planted the bomb. On April 4th, the People's Bureau alerted Tripoli that the attack would be carried out the following morning. The next day, they reported back to Tripoli on the great success of their mission. We have solid evidence about other attacks Gaddafi has planned against the United States installations and diplomats and even American tourists. Thanks to close cooperation with our friends, some of these have been prevented. With the help of French authorities, we recently aborted one such attack, a planned massacre using grenades and small arms of civilians waiting in line for visas at an American embassy.
A few minutes later, the Secretaries of State and Defense met reporters in the White House press room. Secretary Weinberger spelling out details of the mission.
At about 7 p.m. Eastern Time, elements, medium units of the 3rd Air Force attacked targets in the western Libyan zone, and at the same time, A-6s from the America and the Coral Sea attacked targets in the eastern Libya zone as listed here. The targets of the western zone were the military airport near Tripoli, the Azizia barracks, which are a command and control headquarters of the Libyan terrorist activities, and Sidi Bilal, which is a training area, including a maritime diver training unit for terrorists in the west. In the east, the Jamahira barracks, which is an alternate command post from the Azizia barracks, was also attacked, and the Benina air base, from which defensive, suppressive activities and air defense would be mounted, was attacked. We used a combination of 500-pound and 2,000-pound laser-guided weapons and precision-guided delayed gravity bombs. And all of the Navy planes have returned without casualty. All of the F-111s, with one exception, have been accounted for and are returning. There is one that is not accounted for at this time.
In his remarks, President Reagan cited Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which asserts the right of any member nation to use military force for self-defense. It was a theme picked up by the Secretary of State.
We must remember, and of course Europeans particularly remember, that tolerance or appeasement of aggression has historically brought more aggression. In Gaddafi's case, what we have seen over a period of years and escalating in recent months is a continuing increase in the use of terror. So this is not a question of something that we have done being countered by something he has done and so on. It has been an escalation by Gaddafi that has called forward this act of self-defense.
To our friends and allies in Europe who cooperated in today's mission, I would only say you have the permanent gratitude of the American people. Europeans who remember history understand better than most that there is no security, no safety in the appeasement of evil. It must be the core of Western policy that there be no sanctuary for terror. And to sustain such a policy, free men and free nations must unite and work together.
For most of this past weekend, Washington's ambassador to the United Nations, General Vernon Walters, had been traveling from one European capital to another, trying to line up support. Despite the president's fulsome thanks to allies in the plural, apparently only Great Britain was truly cooperative.
As you say, they do not yet share our conviction that action of this kind is necessary.
Well, obviously, if we had permission to fly a direct route, we would have not subjected the pilots to quite such a long flight. But given the available routes that we had, we left England and we reached Libya. It would have been, obviously, from an operational point of view, less risk to the pilots and a quicker time than it took to go the 2,800 nautical miles to get in there.
Was permission sought, for example, from France and denied?
Well, I think that's a fair description.
There was, however, as President Reagan concluded tonight, no longer any acceptable alternative.
We tried quiet diplomacy, public condemnation, economic sanctions, and demonstrations of military force. None succeeded. Despite our repeated warnings, Gaddafi continued his reckless policy of intimidation, his relentless pursuit of terror. He counted on America to be passive. He counted wrong. I warned that there should be no place on earth where terrorists can rest and train and practice their deadly skills. I meant it. I said that we would act with others if possible and alone if necessary to ensure that terrorists have no sanctuary anywhere. Tonight, we have.
Joining us now live from the State Department is National Security Correspondent John McWethy. At the White House, ABC News White House correspondent Sam Donaldson. And joining us from London, ABC's Barry Dunsmore. Sam, when was the decision finally made? It's obviously been in the works for a long time, but when did the president finally decide to go ahead?
Ted, officials here say the president decided on a military option at the middle of last week, say Wednesday morning. And from that moment on, they insist there was never any doubt that it would be used. In fact, they say if General Walters, Vernon Walters, sent to Europe, was not sent to try to solicit Allied support for this. It would have been nice if all the Allies had gone along, but had been sent to inform the Allies that a military option would be used. Mrs. Thatcher was told precisely when, because we wanted to use the F-111s from the British base. But the other Allies, I'm told, were not informed exactly when, simply that the president was going to move.
Now, John McWethy, why now then? Considering the fact that this has been in the works for such a long time, considering the fact that the president has been saying for days that there is incontrovertible proof that the Libyans were involved in the bombing of that nightclub in Berlin.
There are a number of factors, Ted. One of them is that Britain's Margaret Thatcher was not on board, did not say yes to the United States until late last weekend. That was a key factor, according to State Department and Pentagon sources, in finally making the plan move ahead in full speed. Now, until that time, Defense Secretary Weinberger and the Joint Chiefs of Staff had strenuously objected, saying that 2 carriers was not enough to do the job with a prudent measure of safety. Once Thatcher signed on, then the F-111s, the Air Force aircraft, were brought in, and that added to the measure of safety. Another key factor in pushing the operation along was something to do with Soviet ships. Now, those ships had been well away from Tripoli and Benghazi, well away from Libyan waters, until earlier today. In a period, the United States began tracking those ships and realized that they were beginning to move back into those key areas of waters, and the United States decided it better move now so the ships could not provide early warning for the Libyans.
Now, it was certainly a little tough for me to follow, so I imagine it was also tough for our audience to follow precisely the targets that Secretary Weinberger spelled out on that map. Can you explain to us the logic behind some of those targets? Is there any cohesive thread that pulls them all together?
Well, there are 2 sets of barracks that the United States went after. Both of those barracks are said to house and be the headquarters of not only terrorist units, but also some of the elite Gaddafi Guard. These are people that are extremely loyal to Gaddafi. What the United States did not hit, and U.S. intelligence analysts say it was very much on purpose, were regular Army facilities. U.S. intelligence analysts believe that regular Army facilities house people that are probably strongly anti-Gaddafi. At least there have been some sentiments along those lines from the regular Army. So they kept away from those, went only after the extreme loyalists to Gaddafi.
All right, I want to come back to you in just a moment, Jack, and talk to you about some of the specific reasons that F-111s and A-6s and A-7s were used. But first, I'd like to jump over to London and our colleague Barry Dunsmore. Barry, you've been monitoring both Libyan radio and television. What are they saying so far?
Well, Ted, the 3 most important points that have come across from Libyan radio and television, which has been picked up here in London. First of all, a claim that members of Gaddafi's family were injured in the bombing raid on Tripoli. Secondly, that 3 American pilots were brought down and subsequently killed by Libyan citizens on the ground. And finally, there's been a call from Libyan television for the Algerians to begin shelling Western Europe and any other American targets that the Algerians can reach. Those are the central themes of Libyan radio and television monitor here so far.
All right, that brings me then right back to John McWethy again. John, Secretary Weinberger made the point, he sloughed over it a little bit, but made the point that one of those F-111s had apparently not been accounted for. Has it now, or is it missing?
It is definitely missing. There is still no real good explanation for what has happened to it. There have been some reports that it is believed to have ditched in the water. That's the last we know.
Sam, there have been reports coming out of Tripoli, and of course it's a little difficult now to separate fact from fiction, that somehow gunfire continues over there. Has there been any word at the White House as to what is going on over there? Are they tracking that very closely?
Officials here insist that the strikes are over. The strikes lasted for 15 to 20 minutes, and no more are contemplated. at least not in this round. They make very clear here, Ted, that if Colonel Gaddafi doesn't get the message, if he continues with terrorist action, then the president is going to strike again and raise the level, ratchet upward. As far as gunfire in Tripoli at the moment, or places in Libya, I don't think anyone here knows exactly why.
All right, John, if you would wrap it up for us then by explaining to us quickly why the F-111s and why the A-6s and the A-7s. Do they have any particular peculiarities that make them suitable for this? Obviously they do, or they wouldn't have used them, but what are they?
Well, the A-6s and A-7s are peculiar because they fly off of aircraft carriers and you can bring them very close to your target. That makes them ideal. The F-111s are particularly good because they can carry an extremely heavy bomb load. They can carry about a dozen 2,000-pound bombs. Which means that they can come into an area and really dump a lot of firepower on a target very quickly, and all the aircraft are equipped to deal with night targets.
Equipped how? With special radar?
Oh, they have special radar, they have infrared tracking systems, they are all-weather, day and night aircraft, and that's something the Libyans do not have, and that's one reason the U.S. struck at night.
Now, as Secretary Weinberger pointed out, those planes had to make an extraordinary convoluted trip to get from Britain to Libya. They had to be then refueled in midair?
They were refueled by KC-10 tankers, among other different aircraft that were used in the refueling. They were brought in specially by the United States over the course of the last 2 days. They made the extraordinary journey, 2,800 miles instead of about a 1,200-mile straight shot to Libya, because the French, the Spanish, and the Portuguese would not allow the United States to overfly their territory on a mission striking the Libyans.
All right. John McWethy, Sam Donaldson, Barry Dunsmore, thank you very much indeed. There are a lot of obvious questions to be raised about an event with so many implications, and over the course of the next half hour or so, we will try to bring together as many knowledgeable people as we can, and we have assembled indeed as knowledgeable a group as possible here in Washington, in New York, and elsewhere. In our Washington Bureau, 2 members of Congress who were part of the group of congressional leaders briefed in advance today by President Reagan, House Minority Leader Robert Michael, and Democratic Congressman Dante Fascell of Florida, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Robert McFarlane, former White House National Security Advisor. Professor Henry Schuler, a former oil industry executive in Libya, now with Georgetown University's Center for Strategic and International Studies. Ambassador Clovis Maksoud, permanent observer for the Arab League of the United Nations and the Arab League's chief representative to the United States. In New York, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations and an expert on terrorism and author of the book Terrorism, How the West Can Win. We will be back to talk to them in a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Pepperidge Farm Cakes.
Takes practice to frost a Pepperidge Farm layer cake. They're swirled with a spoon, then smoothed by hand. Of course, first, they're baked with rich things like genuine cocoa or luscious coconut, then frozen to stay extra fresh. You see, Pepperidge Farm still remembers simple things make better cakes.
Come on in.
Race ya!
Over 100,000 drivers have participated in a series of nationwide surveys to determine the quality of vehicles designed and built in America.
The surveys measured nearly all makes and models. Models as old as 81 and as recent as 84, including ours. And as a group, our Lincolns and our Mercurys and our Ford cars and trucks were found to be the highest quality vehicles designed and built in America.
How about that, America?
That's what happens when you make quality job one.
Quality is job one.
When you want to know, ask the Parts Pro, AutoWise Auto Parts Store. Use these local merchants from your family find planner. Before you call, you know they will service your area and that they'll still be around when you need them next. Doesn't that make life simpler? Housecraft Aluminum Company, vinyl, steel, aluminum, and custom trim carports and energy replacement windows, free estimates.
Color Time rent-to-own dealers have always worked to rent you the best. Now Color Time introduces televisions as good as its dealers. Sets so reliable, they're the only ones on the market with a 5-year limited warranty. And you can only get them at Color Time. The best dealers, the only 5-year warranty. No wonder we're America's largest rent-to-own system.
Get what you want at Color Time.
Call Color Time today. Ask about a new 5-year limited television warranty.
Stay with ABC News and Peter Jennings for the latest on America's attack on terrorism.
We will persevere.
Tomorrow, watch ABC's World News Tonight.
We have, as I indicated a couple of moments ago, an extraordinary collection of experts with us now. I would like to begin with three of them: Congressman Bob Michael, Congressman Dante Fascell, and Bud McFarland, former National Security Advisor to President Reagan. Congressman Michael, tell me what went on in that briefing this afternoon, would you?
Well, the president began it in a very somber note, letting those of us who were present, that included, of course, the chairman and ranking members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, and those of us in leadership positions in both the House and Senate. And after the president was completed his briefing, he kicked it off to Admiral Poindexter, who picked up then with Secretary Weinberger and Admiral Crowell. And we got a complete briefing on the nature of the strike and how it was to be deployed and the purpose for taking that kind of action.
Now, of course, the point has been made that that briefing was still held early enough that had there been any real complaints from members of Congress, in theory, those F-111s, for example, could have been turned around and the A-6s and the A-7s presumably had not yet taken off. Were any complaints raised, Congressman Michael?
Well, there certainly were some serious questions asked by members, and I think rightfully so, particularly for those of us who, while hearing reverberations that there might be some kind of a strike of this nature, but not knowing for sure and having not been counseled or asked for our comments before that meeting, I think it's natural to expect that we would ask some very serious questions about all kinds of things, and it ran the gamut.
All right, Congressman Fascell, you have in the past raised serious questions about operations of this nature without proper consultation with Congress. Does this fit into proper consultation with Congress, in your view?
Well, we were informed of a decision, Ted, and the question of consultation is a difficult one, particularly if you have a military operation, and the president has a lot of latitude in carrying out his missions as commander-in-chief. I think under the circumstances, what was done was the best that could be done at the time. The question I raised was an entirely different one, though, and not the war powers. It was in the light of the statement of the president tonight that the United States would strike against terrorism, and that there would be no sanctuary anywhere in the world for terrorists. I support the president's action. The United States cannot sit passively by and allow state-supported terrorism to kill Americans, maim Americans and other citizens with impunity. So we had to retaliate. But the question is whether or not we need to cite the UN Charter as the basis for this. Every nation has the right to defend itself. There's no question about that. The issue is that the military might of the United States was brought against another country. And the question that's raised is the constitutional question of Congress supporting the president by some action. I think it's a very serious matter because the pronouncement of the president tonight is a rather new pronouncement. It's war against terrorism anywhere in the world against any country. I think this requires serious consideration by the Congress if the president is to undertake that responsibility by himself without any official action of the Congress except consultation or information. And so while I support the activity, I think we need a real dialogue in this country and consideration by the Congress that since we know that terrorism will not stop and that perhaps other action will be required by the United States, that the Congress needs to be brought into the act in some way to meet the constitutional requirement.
Mr. McFarland, I know that this has been the object of your study for a long time, both while you were in government and now that you are out of government. Analyze for me both the domestic and the foreign policy consequences as you see them now. This is not going to be without response and without reaction, both here at home and overseas.
Well, Ted, I think that today's action was designed to make clear to Gaddafi that there are costs associated with killing Americans, but it was for that specific purpose. And I think that the president must surely have in mind that more broadly, there will be a need to deal with the complete range of terrorist problems, which involve Gaddafi, but a lot more. And for that, your question is very penetrating, because we do need to elevate public understanding by Americans of the nature of this problem, so that they will indeed support a broad range of actions to bring it to a halt. It's going to take a long time. Violence occasionally is the unavoidable part of it, but only a part. Economic sanctions, defensive measures, allied cooperation, defending our overseas installations, all of these things play a role and all require a lot of public understanding, allied understanding, congressional support.
Congressman Michael, is this a good time to take this issue before the Congress and now get firm congressional support for action that the president has already taken, but, as Mr. McFarland points out, action that will almost inevitably be required in the future?
Well, I couldn't help but think as we were sitting in that meeting this afternoon what effect it might have on what we're supposed to be doing in the next couple days with respect to Contra aid down to the south of us, and whether or not it would have a salutary effect or just work the other way around. I wish we could come here tonight and say this is the answer to this question, but I think it's only the beginning. As Mr. Fussell said, we're breaking some very new ground here in which the Congress itself has got to get involved in the debate and in the decision-making process here if we're going to be successful. And it'll be a very spirited one, and frankly, I suspect there might even be some members today who would just be willing to offer amendments to appropriation bills or riders to authorization bills prohibiting action of this kind. I don't think there'd be all that many, but there could certainly be a few, and those will have to be countered, and some of them will have good arguments on why there ought to be a better justification than what we've had, although frankly I'm satisfied.
Gentlemen, we are going to have to move on and take a break, but Congressman Fussell, I would like a quick answer from you if you would. Is Congress going to have to be consulted, not just informed, before the next round of action takes place?
Well, I think there's a way of doing that without impairing either the operation or the prerogative of the president, Ted.
And you think that's going to happen?
I think that we've had some very serious discussions with the administration on this. I think the administration is sensitive to it, and I think the answer is yes.
All right, gentlemen, we still have to hear from Ambassador Netanyahu, Ambassador Maqsood, and Mr. Schuler. We will do that when we continue in just a moment.
No matter what type of lawnmower you're thinking of buying, we can show you a lot of good choices at Sears. In fact, with our tough, dependable Craftsman mowers, you're likely to find more good choices in more kinds of mowers than any place else. No wonder more people choose Craftsman to cut their lawns than any other brand in America.
There's more for your life
During our new century,
at Sears.
Can other long-distance companies offer you all AT&T can? Take a closer look.
Wrong number? I'll credit you for that call.
We'll set up an 800 number so you can dial Rome directly. You can save by placing...
Imagine long distance without all this. Only AT&T has such an extensive network of professionals who can answer questions and suggest ways you can save money. AT&T long distance. For over 100 years, when you reached out, we were there. And you can keep it that way. AT&T, the right choice.
Our lots and huge indoor warehouse are overflowing with brand new cars and trucks here at the Jim Reed Auto and Truck Discount Center. Over 1,000 cars and trucks, and every one clearly marked with our discount tag, showing the retail price and our price. Cavalier's just $69.99, save over $900. S10 pickups just $59.99, save nearly $1,300 during our $9 million inventory reduction sale through Wednesday, April 30th only at the Jim Reed Auto and Truck Discount Center, exit 209A, downtown.
3, 1, 2, 3, 1. My necklace. Where's my necklace? It was here just a minute ago. Has anybody seen my necklace? No. No.
Come on, Marianne. She wants us now.
I'm coming.
I feel so dark inside. Feel like I want to cry. I want to run and hide. It's hard to live with a lie. To be just like my friend must be the reason why. How will all this end? It's hard to live with a lie.
I took
your necklace. I'm really sorry. That's okay.
If you want to be someone special, be someone honest. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons.
Let me begin now by warning our affiliates, and of course you could see it coming tonight given the nature of the subject and the number of guests that we have. We are going to be going beyond our allotted 30 minutes. I hope not too much beyond, but we will be going beyond. A piece of wire copy that just came over that the Libyan information director says that Colonel Gaddafi has not been injured or killed. He is okay. He is okay. That is the quote. We know nothing further about that. Now to three of our other guests who are standing by here in Washington and in New York. The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, who is an expert on international terrorism, the Honorable Benjamin Netanyahu. Clovis Maksoud, who is permanent observer for the Arab League at the United Nations and Arab League chief representative to the United States. And Professor Henry Schuller, a former oil industry executive in Libya, who is now director of energy security studies at Georgetown University's Center for Strategic and International Studies. Let me get, I'm sorry to put it in such broad terms, but let me get an Arab reaction. You represent the Arab League here, Ambassador Maksoud. Outrage, understanding, what, somewhere between the two?
Well, I would say that the reaction of the United States has been definitely disproportionate. Retaliation as a military option means that diplomatic and other political means have been exhausted, which they were not. It did not have the approval, or sufficient approval of your Western allies. Naturally, it has the disapproval of all the Arab states. Now, how this would spill over, I am afraid that it undoubtedly would have a negative effect on the overall Arab-American relations. Let us hope that we can do some damage control, that this operation does not develop into a pattern of behavior by a superpower, that the violence that is prevalent these days in the Middle East must be addressed in the source of it, namely the denial of the central rights of the Palestinian people and the Israeli occupation of Arab territories.
Now, I must pick you up on something you said, and then I'll let Ambassador Netanyahu pick up on it. I'm sure he has something he wants to say, but you said naturally it has the disapproval of all the Arab states. Are you sure of that? Are you sure that the Egyptians, who themselves have been ready to go to war against Libya, are so disapproving of this? Are you sure the Jordanians and the Saudis and others who are concerned about Colonel Gaddafi's actions in the past are so disapproving? I understand they may strike that public posture, but behind the scenes.
Well, I think that this dichotomy between the public posture of the Arabs and the private sentiments of the Arabs is basically, if I may say so, a surreptitious racist tendencies about the Arabs. Naturally, this does not gloss over the fact that there are fundamental disputes among the Arab states, but there is also the dynamics of inter-Arab relations, which, as in the United States, you rally behind the flag, irrespective of your own judgments about the decision. By the same token, we rally around the Arab flag, if you like, whatever we might think of the particular leadership in one country or the other.
All right, let me jump to your colleague in New York, Ambassador Netanyahu. Ambassador Maksoud made the observation a moment ago that what we ought to be looking at are the root causes of some of these terrorist actions, and he points to the disenfranchised Palestinians. I know you don't agree with that.
Well, I tell you, frankly, I don't see what the killing of the British policewoman by Gaddafi when he goes after his dissenters around the world has to do with the Palestinian problem, nor with the hit list that the Egyptians recently uncovered, which included everyone from Francois Mitterrand to the leaders of India. We didn't even merit in Gaddafi's hit list even an honorable mention. The point is, of course, all terrorists have grievances, but not all grievances have terrorists. And the reason that some terrorists resort to this type of a crime is because they have a disposition toward unbridled violence. And this is exactly the situation we have with Gaddafi. Now, what are we going to do? These people who blow up our planes, who massacre our children, who bomb our airports, we have to decide when we're going to stop this world that the Gaddafis and the Khomeinis and the Arafats are trying to foist on us. And I would say that what has happened here today could be the beginning of an important development, an important reassertion of the leaders of the West, the leader being the United States, to forge an anti-terrorist alliance, to align the West, to impel the neutrals to shed their neutrality, to punish the offenders and credibly threaten them with future punishment. I think we can, following this course, we can put the age of terror behind us.
All right, Professor Schuler, I think one thing that Ambassador Netanyahu has just said is undeniable, and that is that we are embarked, in effect, on a new chapter now. The question is, what is that new chapter going to bring us? What does your experience in Libya and in the Arab world tell us as to what is likely to happen next?
Well, unfortunately, I do not believe that Colonel Gaddafi is going to be intimidated by this. And so, therefore, while the president has made the decision, and I'm certainly not going to second-guess the basis for the information on which he made that decision, nonetheless, although the signal has been sent, we now have to move on to a policy to deal with Libya, to deal with Gaddafi. And in my judgment, that has to be a policy that seeks his economic and political isolation. It's not going to be some nice, quick solution that results from bombing or a few days in the Gulf of Sidra. It's going to take perseverance, coordination, and patience to encourage the Libyan people to recognize that Gaddafi imposes such costs on him that they have to get rid of him. That is the only way the support for terrorism from Libya will be stopped.
All right, but let's deal with where we are today. Bombs have fallen on Libya. I have no idea at this point how many Libyans have been killed, but certainly some have been killed and a great deal of damage has been done. Is that going to produce the kind of effect that the president seemed to wish tonight, namely one of letting Gaddafi know what the price is and therefore precluding any further terrorist action? Or in your opinion, Professor Schuler, is it going to produce exactly another notch in the cycle of violence, that is, more of the same?
Well, again, it's not going to intimidate him, and so, and it's not going to undermine him. It's probably going to rally support to him in the country and in the region, and therefore I'm afraid that he will be emboldened to continue on his terrorist action, and I don't know what the next step is that we can take.
What do you think is going to happen next, Ambassador Maqsood? And pick any area that you want. I assume the next step, really, is now Gaddafi's. The ball's in his court.
Well, first of all, I think that we are going to go through a painful reassessment of both in the United States and in the Arab world of the nature of our relations. I think we have to focus on the source, and as Ambassador Netanyahu has said, he tried to lump, in his usual way, resistance to occupation in the South Lebanon and in the West Bank with terrorism. So the question of how to struggle against terrorism, which we all share, and which is fundamentally and qualitatively different from resistance to occupation, I think that remains the ultimate source, because in the final analysis, we are accountable to the international community, but people who have been experiencing hopelessness tend to go into reckless and desperate actions. And to that extent, we have to address ourselves to the source of all the violence that is ensuing, whether legitimate resistance or whether these deplorable acts of terrorism, which we all share in denouncing.
Ted, if I may respond to the ambassador. You know, this line that we hear about, well, these people suffer from some deprivation, from some misery, from some denial of national rights or aspirations, and that's why they have to resort to terrorism. You know, in World War II, the Nazis occupied Europe. This was the worst oppression in history. None of the resistance movements in Nazi-occupied Europe conducted or even condoned terrorism. And there were plenty of German wives and officers, children, and so on. They never bothered to do that. They never even thought of doing that, because they were real freedom fighters. Those who fight for real freedom do not butcher and massacre and bomb little children.
Gentlemen, forgive me for interrupting, but we are talking in a sense now in generalities. We are dealing tonight with a specific. Libya has been attacked. Let me ask you specifically, Ambassador Netanyahu. I assume you've had a chance to communicate with your government this evening. Israeli reaction?
I'll give you my reaction. Israel is now asleep, and I can tell you on the basis of our ongoing policy and the recent statements of our Prime Minister what I think is our reaction, and will probably be heard of this morning. We think that Libya and the other terrorist regimes are conducting war against all the democracies. We think that this war is indivisible. It must be fought indivisibly. We applaud the American courage and the resolve. We are sorry about any possible casualties. We hope there are none. But we think that there is a need for the West as a whole, including other governments, to recognize that they cannot escape from this problem. They cannot not hide their heads in the sand, hope that somehow Gaddafi or the other terrorist leaders will pass over them. They are making Europe a playing field for terrorists. It's time now to apply those anti-terrorist sanctions that have been mentioned earlier in this program, to forge an anti-terror alliance led by the United States. We very much support that.
Professor Schuler, quickly, please, if you would. Have we entered a new chapter now, or is it simply going to be a continuation of the old cycle?
I tend to believe it's a continuation of the old cycle, because Gaddafi's violence has been around for 15 years, and it's simply more of the same.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have some more reaction from overseas.
At 110 miles per hour, engineers find the new Honda Accord LXI hatchback to be quiet and comfortable. At half that speed, you could find it to be twice as quiet and comfortable.
It's time. Time for a credit card that gives you a better deal.
The Discover Card.
With the new Discover Card, you don't have to pay an annual fee. In fact, we pay you with money back on everything you buy. Money you can apply against your balance. From a member of Sears Financial Network. Look for more information in the mail or in national magazines.
$500 million every week. That's how much America still spends on foreign oil. At least $500 million every week. To help control the cost of energy imports, we're using energy efficiently. And we're using our country's own energy resources, like electricity from coal and nuclear energy. Coal and nuclear energy are made in America. Coal and nuclear energy are homegrown.
Great news, truck buyers. Now you can beat the value of the $67.95 Mazda SE5. Introducing Mazda SE5 Plus 5. $625 worth of extra features at no extra charge from Mazda. You get a bed liner, mudguards, sliding rear window, floor mats, and AM/FM stereo. A $625 value at no extra charge. But hurry, offer ends soon.
Get a great Mazda deal today in Bowling Green, Clarksville, and Nashville.
Latest casualty, damage, and status reports of tonight's U.S. strike on Libyan terrorism.
Tomorrow on ABC's World News This Morning.
Before Good Morning America.
Tomorrow on Good Morning America, David Hartman will interview Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger about America's attack on Libya. Also, reaction from our allies and the Arab world on Good Morning America.
Joining us now for a late update on tonight's story, my ABC colleague, Barry Dunsmore from London, and in Moscow, Walter Rogers. Barry, let's go to you first. What are you hearing from the Libyans?
Well, once again, Libyan radio monitored here in London is appealing for assistance from the rest of the Arab world. The latest appeal goes to the soldiers, officers, and pilots in Morocco, in Syria, and in Algeria. And they say that if you do not respond to our appeal, may you be cursed forever. We also hear from the Italians that Italian airspace was definitely not used in the attack. And finally, Dennis Healey, the spokesman for the Labour Party, claims that there's going to be an enormous row in the House of Commons today because of Mrs. Thatcher's decision to allow the U.S. to use British bases. He says that it represents the end of Western influence in the Middle East, certainly British influence, and that it may bring about the possible downfall of the president of Egypt, and that terrorism will only increase as the result of this particular action.
All right, standing by telephone in Moscow is our Moscow correspondent, Walt Rogers. Walt, the Secretary of State mentioned earlier this evening, I believe it was the Chargé d'Affaires, the Soviet Chargé d'Affaires was called in and was informed of what was about to happen. Has there as yet been any reaction from Moscow?
Ted, the
the bombing occurred at 4 in the morning Moscow time. Nonetheless, we've had on the Soviet newswire TASS and other commentaries here some rather sharp reaction. The Soviets are saying American imperialism has perpetuated a new and bloody crime. They say the United States has started speaking with its true tongue, the tongue of bombs and flames and death. And the Soviets are saying the aim of the new bloody American aggression is to try to intimidate the Libyan people. Having said that, so far all we have from the Soviets is this rhetorical response, which is pretty much what we would expect. The most important question to ask, and the one to which we don't have an answer, is how will Mikhail Gorbachev, the new Soviet leader, or relatively new Soviet leader, respond to this sort of crisis? In the past, Middle East crises, like in 1982 when the Israelis invaded Lebanon, brought no real response from the Soviets, even though an important Soviet ally, the Syrians, came into real difficulties. The Soviets did very little to help the Syrians at that time. The question is, what will Mr. Gorbachev do? Personally, and this is just a personal opinion, I don't think the Soviets will offer much more than more material aid. For one thing, Mr. Gorbachev does not like Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi was in Moscow in early October of last year, and they had a terrific row, that is Gorbachev and Gaddafi, over a number of issues. And perhaps more importantly is the overall Soviet view towards Mr. Gaddafi at that time last October. An official at the Soviet Foreign Ministry said to me privately that the Soviets think Gaddafi's a nut. The Soviets will support Gaddafi rhetorically, but I don't think much more than that in terms of direct military assistance.
Walt, thank you. Let me take advantage of some of the extraordinary resources that we have here tonight. Robert McFarland, former National Security Advisor to President Reagan. That must have been one of the primary things that the President took into account before he ordered today's action, namely the expectation of what the Soviets would or would not do. How safe a bet was that?
Well, it was a very safe bet, and the President made the right judgment on it. The Soviets, while they may benefit from Gaddafi's actions here and there, and on the whole have an interest in helping him, are not entirely comfortable with a unpredictable person who may get them into a confrontation with us. And so I wouldn't expect the Russians to do more than what we have heard from your correspondent there, and that is to posture, to criticize, but probably also to lean on their aberrant client here.
All right, let me turn once again to our congressional leadership here. Congressman Michael, Congressman Fasell, how resistant is Congress going to be to what it now appears is going to be a firestorm of protest from at least some of our European allies? It now becomes quite clear that the Italians are putting as much distance as they possibly can between this and today's action. We heard that Dennis Healey is predicting a fiery debate in the House of Commons today. Congressman Michael, are people going to start twitching nervously when the firestorm hits?
Oh, I think there's going to be some of that expression, but I think we're also going to have the administration telling some of the members of the conversations they've had with some of the European leaders who frankly have felt that whatever action we've taken in the past has been too little and in not great enough amounts, and that frankly if it were their doing, it might have been even on a broader and grander scale. But we'll have a spirited debate on this, but I think, frankly, the majority of the members of the Congress are going to support what the President has done today.
Congressman Fasell, what the President said today was, we tried diplomacy, quiet diplomacy, we tried the economic pressure, we tried the warnings of military action, nothing helped. He's certainly right.
Well, he certainly is, Ted. I mean, we just can't sit passively by and see people killed and maimed just because Gaddafi has declared war on the United States through state-supported terrorism. I think that now, as far as our European allies are concerned, we've got to demonstrate, if they need any more demonstration, that this is an indivisible fight. The attack is against all democracies, and we have to be united in dealing with this problem.
I guess what I'm asking both you gentlemen, and then we will have one quick more trip around the horn to get reaction from our other guests, but what I'm asking you two congressional leaders in particular is about American staying power. We're always terrific on the night after. Then the second thoughts start to come in. Then we see that it's a fight that's going to take a long time, and then voices are heard raising all kinds of questions, and before you know it, we are so divided that we're incapable of taking further action. Congressman Fussell, you see that happening this time around?
No, I don't, Ted, but I think a very serious question has been raised. We're not at peace, that's for sure. And if this is an act of war and self-defense, then I think absolutely Congress has to be brought into the loop, and we have to make as certain as we possibly can that we don't have the division that might arise otherwise.
Congressman Michael, same question to you.
Well, I'd certainly have to agree that the ball, as you suggested in one of your questions, is back in Gaddafi's court now. What other response he will make to this, I think, will have some bearing upon where we go. And the president made it quite clear to us, I think, in our briefing today that if it continues, there are going to be other measures taken by us, and that he certainly is not going to be withering or shying away from his responsibility. So I'd expect the heat will be turned up.
Mr. McFarland, on this program last week, the former Deputy Director of the CIA, Admiral Bobby Inman, suggested that maybe the time had come for a declaration of war so that we can get Congress clearly on the side of the administration, get the American people joined behind the president. You have the active war today without the declaration. Is that a next logical step?
Well, Ted, I think a step like that, to the extent that it would shake American thinking to its very core, in having that purpose would have a salient effect. Because indeed, this is not something that any man, woman, or child in this country need argue very much about. This is an issue of right and wrong, which Judeo-Christian and Muslim values are common in condemning. It is outright murder of innocent human beings. Now, taking action in response and making clear that there are costs is something that should be unequivocally supported by anyone in this country and overseas, to include the Arab states. Everyone knows this is not the end of terrorism, and the policy to end it goes well beyond this kind of thing. But indeed, this kind of thing, making clear there are costs to killing innocent people, is right on the mark.
All right, Ambassador Maqsood, a closing thought from you, please.
Well, I think that the United States, through this very regretful act, acted as a big power. Whether it acted as a great power is for history to judge. I have my doubts about that.
Ambassador Netanyahu.
I think that the regimes in the Middle East are based on the worship of power, and they despise weakness. Anger precedes respect. When you strike and show them that you will not accept these punishments. It's not a cycle of violence. It's the gradual conditioning of these regimes that there'll be a price to pay. The indispensable element in any policy, Ted, we could talk about it all night, is one word. I think you've shown it. This administration has shown that it has plenty of it. That word is courage.
Professor Schuller.
Ted, one thing that I think is a mistake is to assume that we have exhausted everything we can do in terms of economic and political sanctions. Because if that were the case, there would be nothing left but military and more military. In fact, we have not exhausted economic sanctions so long as there continue to be American companies down there producing oil, helping to drill the wells, and all the rest of it. I think that is the first order of business for this administration in the cold light of dawn tomorrow.
All right. Mr. McFarland, before I ask you for your closing thought, just a question of information here, and as an ex-military man, perhaps you know, what's the crew of an F-111? We apparently have one missing. How many men would be involved?
2.
You've got a pilot. Who's the other man?
You've got a pilot, bombardier, navigator, and that normal complement is what's missing now.
All right. He's the weapons officer then, the other guy.
All right.
All right. Do you have a closing thought, sir?
Well, I think, Ted, that this has to be absorbed by Americans as not a passing phenomena that is remote from the United States. It is an uncivilized act, and for as long as the Western powers, and Europeans are most guilty, tolerate this, ignoring it, they ignore their responsibilities to deal with barbarism. If we aspire to be civilized countries, when there are uncivilized people misbehaving, we have an obligation to act. As Henry Schuller says, economically, they haven't done that. Failing that, costs must be imposed. And tonight, in an isolated way, they have. But if nothing else comes from this, it ought to sober people to rally so that we can come together in a comprehensive way of coping with this problem across the board, but united as a country, as a people, and as Western democracies. It also extends to the Arab states. Gaddafi has killed countless scores of innocent Arab women, children. This is not an anti-Arab or a non-Arab phenomenon, but we can counter it. It will take time. This demonstration, the first time that there has been evidence that there are indeed costs to killing innocent people, can now form part of a backdrop of many more actions, and it's the beginning of wisdom.
Mr. McFarland, I thank you very much, Congressman Michael, Ambassador Netanyahu, Ambassador Clovis Maksoud, Professor Schuler, Congressman Dante Fasel. It's been a long, long day. I suspect we have some long days still ahead of us. I'm very grateful to all of you for joining us this evening. Thank you. There will be full coverage of the latest developments following the U.S. bombing of Libya on World News This Morning and Good Morning America, with a complete wrap-up of the day's events on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a special edition of ABC News Nightline. For a transcript of tonight's broadcast, send $2 to Journal Graphics, Box 234, Ansonia Station, New York, New York, 10023. Nightline is a presentation of ABC News.
Wednesday.
I'd like you to break my brother out of prison.
Love puts MacGyver behind bars in an exciting new adventure. Wednesday.
WKRN, Nashville's Channel 2.